The New York Giants head into the final week of training camp, but there's still some unanswered questions. We're going to go over that plus a whole lot more on today's Locked On Giants podcast, coming your way next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Chen, a credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI. That's where you can find my written work, as well as the written work of my editorial team, doing a great job over there. We got some great stuff coming out. And as always, a big welcome on in to my everydayers, to my Blue Crew community members, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you are watching us on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel if you have not done so already. Don't forget to click the little bell to receive notifications every time I post a new video. And if you wouldn't mind, please like the video. All of it helps in the long run. So thanks again. On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we are now entering the final week of training camp. And the Giants still have some roster questions that need to be addressed. And we're going to go through some of these questions. I did a 53-man roster projection for New York Giants on SI. I'm going to do another roster projection probably after the Jets game, but that one I'm going to do here on the Locked On Giants podcast. But I want to talk about some of the questions that are popping up and how they might, approach that. Then in segment 2, speaking of questions, why those of you who are screaming for a change at quarterback, you're just probably not going to get your wish answered. The Giants are going to ride or die with what they've got. And I'll explain why that is, the benefits to what that all boils down to for the Giants. And then finally in segment 3, a little bit of a surprise here in that Andrew Thomas, his contract was restructured by the Giants. So I'll tell you why I was surprised by that, how much they saved, and what that could potentially mean for the Giants moving forward. So we'll break all that down for you on today's Locked On Giants podcast. Again, welcome on in. All right, let's get to the questions. All right, so basically, I did a 53-man roster projection for New York Giants on SI. I didn't have a whole lot of changes. I think, maybe I've moved a few numbers around. Like, for example, I initially had 4 running backs, 3 tight ends, and I changed that up a little bit. But in going through the roster, there are still a few question marks that the preseason games and the practices have yet to really resolve. And, some of them you obviously know. Like, for example, we're going to start off with cornerback. And I'm not just talking cornerback 2, which to me still remains a question mark, even though right now it looks like Nick McLeod is going to get that job with Cordell Flott continue to be sidelined. But really, the big concern I have at that position is the depth. A lot of young talent on that team, and it's been inconsistent. All right. I think a lot of us have spent so much time talking about the inconsistencies at quarterback that I don't think enough attention is being paid to the cornerback position and the inconsistencies and question marks with the depth there. And I just think that's something we need to talk about, because think about it, folks. If there is an injury to one of the starters, what are they going to do? All right, let's assume that the starters are going to be Deonte Banks and Nick McLeod. And by the way, I'm not so sure they want Nick McLeod to be that guy. I think they would have preferred to have Nick McLeod be kind of a utility type of guy, a guy who could come in and start if somebody was injured for a week or two, but also a guy that they can move in the slot and, just also devote to special teams, because he is a very good special teams player. So if the Giants have an injury, what are they going to do? Seriously, I mean, they have Trey Hawkins, they've got Darnay Holmes. They do have some injured guys too. I mentioned Cordell Flott was injured. Drew Phillips is dealing with an injury. David Long Jr. is dealing with an injury. Now, the Giants were off on Monday, so we didn't get an update from Brian Dable as to where these guys are, but it's getting late early. And, the depth at that position is a huge, huge, huge problem and question mark that they're going to have to address one way or another. And I think they will address it. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on in the program. All right. The other position to me that is still a question mark, swing tackle. Now, the starting tackles are set. It's going to be Jermaine Oluminor and Andrew Thomas. Very good pair, by the way. But who's the swing tackle? Is it going to be Evan Neal, who is still ramping up and still hasn't gotten on the field in a game? Is it going to be Joshua Azudu, who, quite frankly, I'm not so sure he's cut out to play tackle at this level. I think he's more of a guard. Is it Matt Nelson, who just, to my eyes at any rate, just hasn't looked that sharp? Is it somebody who's not on the roster yet? These are the questions that the Giants have to answer because, again, all it takes is for an injury, and now all of a sudden you're scrambling. And what you don't want to have happen, obviously, is you don't want to have a massive drop-off in depth, in talent level. And, look, if you're going from Andrew Thomas to a backup, that's going to be a drop-off. I mean, there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Same thing with Oluminor. But the idea is to make it so that it's not that big of a drop-off. And right now, I can't honestly say, and maybe you guys, don't agree or disagree with me or whatever. I can't honestly say that the Giants are in that position to where any of their backup options don't represent a huge drop-off in the depth from the starting roles. So definitely something they need to address. The same could be said for the edge rushers. All right, the edge rushers, to me, you've got Kayvon Thibodeau, you've got Brian Burns. They're set. I think Azeez Ojulari will make the roster, although I'll tell you what, Benton Whitley has looked pretty good. So I could see him maybe pushing for a spot. But is there another guy that will maybe step up? I have the Giants with 4 outside linebackers. I'm not so sure who the 4th guy is. I mean, right now, quite honestly, I have Ojulari as my 4th guy. I don't know if that's going to be the case. I mean, you would think it would be, but then again, the coaches always say, oh, it doesn't matter, how you got here. It matters what you've done. And I don't know, guys, I just don't feel like, beyond Thibodeau and Burns, you have Boogie Basham, you got Ojulari, you got Fox, Benton Whitley, and Ovi Okuhafu. I don't know. I mean, those last 2 spots, I think it's going to be Boogie Basham and Ojulari. But again, I can make a case for Benton Whitley because I think he has something like 8 quarterback pressures in his first 2 games, these preseason games, and he's played well. And I get it. It's come against, like second and third string players. But look, those guys are competing too. So don't dismiss just because the guy, stood out against second and third string, It's all about rising to the level of your competition. It's kind of like in college when you have, a small school program and a player really stands out as a man amongst boys, so to speak. That's what you kind of look for. And the Giants, to me, I mean, I haven't been wowed by Azeez Ojulari. I think he makes the roster. I think he's the 4th guy, but we'll see. We'll definitely have to see if that's the case. All right. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, well, what about quarterback? Well, I don't have that as a big question mark, believe it or not, on my list. And I'm going to talk about quarterback in the next segment and explain to you why I don't have that as a question mark. So don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and coming up this week on the Locked On Giants podcast, the Giants are back at practice on Tuesday, which for most of you watching the show, it's today. So we will have a practice report. Now it's kind of like we're moving more towards regular season type schedule. So it's a little bit less intense. It's not going to be a padded practice on Tuesday, but it's going to be a practice all the same. And then Wednesday, of course, is the joint practice with the New York Jets. That is an afternoon session. I am planning to be there. I'm just waiting for confirmation that I've been approved to go, but I am planning to be there. And that will probably be a later show. I'll bring you that show later in the evening because by the time I get home and get everything organized and whatnot, then I'll be able to record and get a show out to you. So that's going to be a big day for the land of the Giants. And then Thursday, a light practice is scheduled. Friday is nothing. Saturday is the preseason game, and then we wait on the roster. So that's kind of the layout for the rest of the week, and I hope you will stay with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Okay, so in the last segment, I did not put quarterback as one of my unanswered questions. And you're probably wondering, or some of you are probably wondering, why? Especially given, Daniel Jones's performance in his first live action in 9 months, especially considering how Drew Lock didn't look all that great when he played in week 1, and especially considering Tommy DeVito's kind of been up and down. Why don't I have quarterback as a question mark? Folks, it's really simple. The Giants are going to ride or die with what they've got at this point. All right. Barring injury, they're going to ride or die with what they have. And here's why. If you go back and you look at the history with Brian Daboll, he has always liked to have quarterbacks who have been in the system, either with the Giants or going back to the days of Buffalo, because Daboll runs a pretty complex system. And to bring in a new quarterback at this point, just, the guy would be so far behind. And, look, this is a make or break year for the Giants. Let's call it what it is. They can't afford to have another bad year like they did last year, even though last year was a result of, the perfect storm. Everything that could have gone wrong did. The Giants have to turn it around. All right. Now, to start all over with a new quarterback, bringing in somebody off the street that isn't as familiar with the system, that's going to set them back even further. So I realize there are a lot of you out there who, like me, have your doubts about Daniel Jones and if he's going to rebound and be anything close to what he was in 2022. There are some of you out there that say, hey, don't worry about it. It's one preseason game. Don't put much stock in it. Folks, it's a question mark. I'm telling you right now, there is a question mark about Daniel Jones. And, they're optimistic because the kid does work his butt off. He studies, he does everything you could possibly want. But, as I've said in yesterday's program and in past programs, the problems seem to be the same, with decision-making, with, accuracy, all kinds of things. And not all of that is on rust. You cannot blame all that on him being rusty. All right. It's kind of like, the best example I could give you. I know how to play a guitar. All right. I know all the notes. I know, how to position my fingers on the fretboard. But if I don't practice every day, I get rusty. All right. It's not that I don't know what to do. It's just I've got to retrain my fingers to hit the right notes on the fretboard. So there's a difference between, being rusty and just not knowing where to go. All right. Not knowing what to do. And that's where I think they're at right now with Daniel Jones. He knows, I think, the arm strength is there. There's nothing physical that you could honestly say is holding him back. At least it doesn't look like that. But the continued issues with the reads, that's a problem. And, for those of you who are watching this on Tuesday, 8 o'clock in the morning, over on New York Giants on SI.com, Coach Gene Clemens did a breakdown of all of Daniel Jones's throws in the in the Houston game. And it was very revealing because what he did was he broke down the patterns, he broke down the mechanics. Was it the right decision? Was it the fault of the receiver? Was it just a good play by the defense? It's a really good and comprehensive look at what Daniel Jones did. All right. And you can truly say, when we say that he had a mixed bag, Coach Gene's findings pretty much validated that. So you just need a little bit better from a quarterback entering his 6th season. And some of it, like I said yesterday, not all of it is on rust. You can make a case for maybe some throws and some accuracy issues, maybe here and there. But a lot of it is also with the decision making and the recognition. And that's not necessarily on rust. That's based on, preparation, and some of that stuff at this point should be muscle memory, you would think. So, the bottom line though, folks, is there's no white knight riding in to save the day at quarterback. It's pretty much ride or die with Daniel. And if he, for whatever reason, can't get it done, Drew Lock is going to be number 2. And if Drew Lock isn't available, it's going to be Tommy DeVito. And if Tommy DeVito, if we get down to quarterback 3 on the depth chart, then this team is in big trouble. Because, again, you just can't have that. It's just, you've got the upgraded offensive line. You've got an upgraded receiving core. The running game is not that bad. You need the quarterback to step up. Otherwise, it's going to be a long, long year for this team. So that being said, ride or die with Daniel, whether we like it or not. And we'll see. Hopefully Daniel balls out. Hopefully, he comes out against the Jets, assuming that he's going to play. And Dable hasn't said what he's going to do with the starters. But quite honestly, if I were him, I would play the starters at least for a quarter. Get them as much work as possible, because don't rest on your laurels based on a preseason 2. I mean, now you're talking almost 15 days or so, 2 weeks in between live game reps. I don't think that would be smart. So we'll see what he does. But if they do play the starters, Daniel Jones needs to be a little bit more consistent as opposed to being up and down the way he was in the Houston game. All right, coming up next, the Giants made I won't call it a surprising move. It's just the timing of the move is surprising. And that was they restructured Andrew Thomas's contract. So I'll break that down for you. What does it mean? What's the impact on the salary cap? And where do they go from here? So don't go anywhere. I'll have that for you shortly. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And again, thank you for spending part of your day with us here on Locked On Giants. And in this segment, the Giants made a move with regards to their salary cap. And it's not an unexpected move. I figured it was coming eventually. I just didn't think it was going to happen this year. So for those of you who missed it, the Giants restructured left tackle Andrew Thomas's base salary for 2024, which was due to be $14.175 million. And they converted $4.175 million of that into a signing bonus, which opened up $3.34 million in 2024 cap space. Now, Field Yates of ESPN, who reported this, estimated the Giants have about $18 million in cap space. But according to the NFLPA public report and according to Over the Cap, the Giants had about $10 million in cap space before all these transactions went through. So the math isn't quite adding up for what Field Yates is reporting. I think it's somewhere more along 13, maybe 13.5 million cap space. But, the point is, okay, why was this a surprise? The The Giants had about 10 million in cap space, like I said, according to Over the Cap, which was the 27th most in the NFL. Not a lot, but enough to probably get them through the regular season. So I thought, that, okay, eventually, yes, they're going to need to convert Andrew Thomas's, they're going to need to convert some of that money into a signing bonus and clear space out. I thought they would wait till next year, in all honesty, because I just thought they had enough, to get through the rest of the year. So when I saw that notice, the first thing I said was, is something cooking there? Are the Giants maybe looking to make a move or anticipating a move? Maybe a cornerback becomes available. Maybe an edge rusher, another edge rusher is going to become available. What do they need that extra money for? Because theoretically, again, they should be able to get through the year with 10 million. I mean, it should be enough for the standard practice squad elevations that they do. It should be enough for any signings that they want to do. Now, here's the other thing. The waiver wire, obviously, is going to come into factor. So come cut down day, the Giants are 6th in the waiver wire order. Waiver wire order is set according to how the draft order was in the spring, and it stays that way for the first 3 weeks of the season. So my guess here is that the Giants, in doing their due diligence, they're anticipating certain guys to break free. Certain guys will hit the waiver wire, and they're going to be aggressive in the claim order. And that's what I think is going to happen. Now, as for what positions, I think cornerback is going to be one of the positions they definitely address. They're going to have to. I question if maybe they add to the safety group. Will they add to the offensive line? Will they add to the edge rusher group? These are questions that in segment 1 I talked about, possibly being addressed. Where else could they possibly add to? Receiver, they should be fine. If anything, I'm waiting to see if maybe they look to trade one of those excess receivers that they have, pick up some draft picks, see if they can't get something for at least one of those guys. I think the depth at inside linebacker is a little shaky right now, given the injury situations. You got Deontay Johnson sideline. Micah McFadden was hurt. Carter Coughlin was hurt. So the depth there is a little shaky. So maybe the Giants look to add there. So yeah, I mean, there's a possibility that Joe Shane's going to be really active on the waiver wire. That, the 53-man roster, the initial 53-man roster we see, that's going to change. That's why, we never say it's the final 53 because it's not final. It changes over the course of the first weeks of the season. So I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out. But getting back to Andrew Thomas and the money, all that did was that added like another 300,000 or so over the life of the contract, because it just dumped an extra 300,000 prorated into each of the next 5 years. And the contract, I think, has 6 more years to go. So remember, you can only prorate a signing bonus 5 years. That's the maximum. But yeah, I think moves are coming. I don't necessarily think it's going to be a big time trade. I'd be surprised if that's what happens. But the Giants, I think after 2 weeks, 2 preseason games, I should say, I think they pretty much know where their weaknesses are and where they have to shore up. And they are getting ready, folks, to spend because they're going to have to. They cannot go into the 2024 regular season with the talent that they currently have on the 90-man roster. Even after that shaved down to 53, there are just enough holes to where you say, look, if we don't address them, they're going to come back to bite us. And I think, you start with cornerback because that to me is the number one problem on this team right now. So we'll see how it plays out. The rosters will start to take shape in about, I think, a week and a half. Still one more preseason game to go. Still some guys who can, salvage their status on the roster. We'll see how that works out. A little later on in the week, I'll do a segment on guys that really need to, have a make or break type of a game against the Jets. And we'll just keep on plugging away here. Keep on following all the developments of the Giants, where they're at, where they're going, and what they have to do. And right now, folks, it's a lot. So, all right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in and spending part of your day with us. We hope we will see you tomorrow. Have a good one.